support not only themselves, but their wives and children as well. And some, in fact, attain even a higher degree of prosperity by hard work with their own hands. For the earth repays most justly and well those who cultivate her, returning many times as much as she received, and furnishing an abundance of all the necessities of life to anyone who's willing to work. And this she does without violating one's dignity or self-respect. You may be sure that no one who was not demoralized by soft living would say that the labor of the farmer was degrading or unfit for a good man. How, I ask, could planting trees or ploughing or pruning vines not be honourable? Are not sowing seed and harvesting and threshing all occupations for free men and befitting good men? Even keeping flocks, as it did not disgrace Hesiod, nor prevent him from being a poet and beloved of the gods, so it would not prevent anyone else. In fact, to me, this is the most agreeable of all aspects of farming, because it gives the spirit more leisure to reflect on and to investigate the things that have to do with our own development and training. For while, to be sure, the occupations which strain and tire the whole body compel the mind to share in concentration upon them, or at all events, upon the body, yet the occupations which require not too much physical exertion do not hinder the mind from reflecting on some of the higher things, and by such reasoning from increasing its own wisdom, a goal toward which every philosopher earnestly strives. For these reasons, I recommend particularly the life of a shepherd. But speaking generally, if one devotes himself to the life of philosophy and tills the land at the same time, I should not compare any other way of life to his, nor prefer any other means of livelihood. For is it not living more in accord with nature to draw one's sustenance directly from the earth, which is the nurse and mother of us all, rather than from some other source? Is it not more like the life of a man to live in the country than to sit idly in the city, like the sophists, who will say that it is not more healthy to live out of doors than to shun the open air and the heat of the sun? Tell me, do you think it's more fitting for a free man by his own labour to procure for himself the necessities of life, or to receive them from others? But surely it is plain that not to require another's help for one's need is more dignified than asking for it. How very good and happy and blessed of heaven is the life of the soil, when along with it the goods of the spirit are not neglected. The example of Myson of Chen may show, whom the god called wise, and Aglaus of Psocis, whom he hailed as happy, both of whom lived on the land and tilled the soil with their own hands, and held aloof from the life of the town. Is not their example worthy of emulation, and an incentive to follow in their footsteps, and to embrace the life of husbandry with a zeal like theirs? What perhaps someone may say, is it not preposterous for an educated man who is able to influence the young to the study of philosophy to work the land and to do manual labour just like a peasant? Yes, that would be really too bad if working the land prevented him from the pursuit of philosophy or from helping others to its attainment. But since that is not so, pupils would seem to me rather benefited by not meeting with their teacher in the city nor listening to his formal lectures and discussions, but by seeing him work in the fields, demonstrating his own labour, the lessons which philosophy inculcates, that one should endure hardships and suffer the pains of labour with his own body, rather than depend upon another for sustenance. What is there to prevent a student, while he's working, from listening to a teacher speaking about self-control or justice or endurance? For those who teach philosophy well do not need many words, nor there's any need that pupils should try to master all this current mass of precepts on which we see our sophists pride themselves. They are enough to consume a whole lifetime. but the most necessary and useful things it is not impossible for men to learn in addition to their farm work, especially if they are not kept at work constantly but have periods of rest. Now I know perfectly well that few will wish to learn in this way, yet it would be better if the majority of young men who say they're studying philosophy did not go near a philosopher. I mean those spoiled and effeminate fellows by whose presence the good name of philosophy is stained. For the true lovers of philosophy, there is not one who would not be willing to live with a good man in the country, even if the place be very rude, since he would be bound to profit greatly from this sojourn, by living with his teacher day and night, by being away from the evils of the city, which are an obstacle to the study of philosophy, and from the fact that his conduct, whether good or bad, cannot escape observation, a great advantage to those who are learning. Also, to eat and drink and sleep under the supervision of a good man is a great benefit. All these things which would come about inevitably from living together in the country, Theognis praised in the verses where he says, "Drink and eat and sit down with good men, and win the approval of those whose influence and power is great." That he means that none others but good men have great power for the good of men. If one eats and drinks and sits down with them, he is shown in the following. From good men you will learn good, but if you mingle with the bad, you will destroy even such soul as you had. Therefore, let no one say that farming is an obstacle to learning or to teaching the lessons of duty, for it can scarcely be such an obstacle if we realize that under these conditions, the pupil lives in closest association with the teacher, and the teacher has the pupil constantly at hand. And where this is the case, earning a living by farming seems to be most suitable for the philosopher. Lecture 13a. What is the chief end of marriage? That the primary end of marriage is community of life with a view to the procreation of children. The husband and wife, he used to say, should come together for the purpose of making life in common and of procreating children, and furthermore of regarding all things in common between them, and nothing peculiar or private to one or the other, not even their own bodies. The birth of a human being which results from such a union is, to be sure, something marvellous, but it is not yet enough for the relation of husband and wife, inasmuch as quite apart from marriage it could result from any other sexual union, just as in the case of animals. But in marriage there must be above all perfect companionship and mutual love of husband and wife, both in health and in sickness, and under all conditions, since it was with desire for this as well as for having children that both entered upon marriage. Where then this love for each other is perfect, and the two share it completely, each striving to outdo the other in devotion, the marriage is ideal and worthy of envy, for such a union is beautiful. But where each looks only to his own interests and neglects the other, or what is worse, when one is so minded and lives in the same house, but fixes his attention elsewhere, and is not willing to pull together with his yoke-mate, nor to agree, then the union is doomed to disaster. And though they live together, yet their common interests fare badly. Eventually, they separate entirely, or they remain together and suffer what is worse than loneliness. Lecture 13b. What is the chief end of marriage? Therefore, those who contemplate marriage ought to have regard neither for family, whether either be one of high-born parents, nor for wealth, whether on either side there be great possessions, nor for physical traits, where one or the other have beauty. For neither wealth nor beauty nor high birth is effective in promoting partnership of interest or sympathy, nor again are they significant for producing children. But as for the body, it is enough for marriage that it be healthy of normal appearance and capable of hard work, such as would be less exposed to the snares of tempters, better adapted to perform physical labour, and not wanting in strength to beget or to bear children. With respect to character or soul, one should expect that it be habituated to self-control and justice in a world, naturally disposed to virtue. These qualities should be present in both man and wife. For without sympathy of mind and character between husband and wife, what marriage can be good, what partnership advantageous? How could two human beings who are base have sympathy of spirit one with the other? Or how could one that is good be in harmony with one that is bad? No more than a crooked piece of wood could be fitted to a straight one, or two crooked ones be put together. For the crooked one will not fit another crooked one, and much less the opposite, a crooked with a straight one. So a wicked man is not friendly to a wicked one, nor does he agree with him, and much less with a good man. Lecture 14. Is marriage a handicap for the pursuit of philosophy? Again, when someone said that marriage and living with a wife seemed to him a handicap to the pursuit of philosophy, Musonius said that it was no handicap to Pythagoras, nor to Socrates, nor to Crates, each of whom who lived with a wife, and one could not mention better philosophers than these. Crates, although homeless and completely without property or possessions, was nevertheless married. Furthermore, not having a shelter of his own, he spent his days and nights in the public porticos of Athens, together with his wife. How then can we, who have a home to start with, and some of us even have servants to work for us, venture to say that marriage is a handicap for philosophy? Now the philosopher is indeed the teacher and leader of men in all the things which are appropriate for men according to nature, and marriage, if anything, is manifestly in accord with nature. For to what other purpose did the Creator of mankind first divide our human race into two sexes, male and female, then implant in each a strong desire for association and union with the other, instilling in both a powerful longing for each other, the male for the female and the female for the male? Is it not then plain that he wished the two to be united and live together, and by their joint efforts to devise a way of life in common, and to produce and rear children together, so that the race may never die? Tell me then, is it fitting for each man to act for himself alone, or to act in the interest of his neighbour also? Not only that there may be homes in the city, but also that the city may not be deserted, and that the common good may best be served. If you say that each one should look out for his own interests alone, you represent man as no different from a wolf or any other of the wildest beasts which are born to live by violence and plunder, sparing nothing from which they may gain some advantage, having no part in a life in common with others, no part in cooperation with others, no share of any notion of justice. If you agree that the man's nature most closely resembles the bee, which cannot live alone, for it dies when left alone, but bends its energies to the one common task of his fellows, and toils and works together with his neighbours. If this is so, and in addition you recognise that for man, evil consists in injustice and cruelty and indifference to a neighbour's trouble, while virtue is brotherly love and goodness and justice and beneficence and concern for the welfare of one's neighbour. With such ideas, I say, it would be each man's duty to take thought for his own city, and to make of his home a rampart for its protection. But the first step toward making a home such a rampart is marriage. Thus whoever destroys human marriage destroys the home, the city, and the whole human race. For it would not last if there were no procreation of children, and there would be no just and lawful procreation of children without marriage. That the home or the city does not depend upon women alone or upon men alone, but upon their union with each other, is evident. One could find no other association more necessary nor more pleasant than that of men and women. For what man is so devoted to his friend as a loving wife is to her husband? What brother to a brother? What son to his parents? Who is so longed for when absent as a husband by his wife, or a wife by her husband? Whose presence would do more to lighten grief or increase joy or remedy misfortune? To whom is everything judged to be common, body, soul, and possessions except man and wife? For these reasons, all men consider the love of a man and wife to be the highest form of love, and no reasonable mother or father would expect to entertain a deeper love for his own children than for the one joined to him in marriage. Indeed, how much the love of a wife for her husband surpasses the love of parents for their children is clearly illustrated by the familiar story of how Admetus, receiving from the gods the privilege of living twice the time allotted to him if he could get someone else to die in his place, found his parents unwilling to die for him, although they were old, but his wedded wife, Alcetus, though still very young, readily accepted death in her husband's place. How great and worthy an estate is marriage is plain from this also, that gods watch over it, great gods too, in the estimation of men. First Hera, and for this reason we address her as the patroness of wedlock. Then Eros, then Aphrodite, for we assume that all of these perform the function of bringing together man and woman for the procreation of children. Where indeed does Eros more properly belong than in the lawful union of man and wife? Where Hera? Where Aphrodite? When would one more appropriately pray to these divinities than when entering into marriage? What should we more properly call the work of Aphrodite than the joining of wife and husband? Why then should anyone say that such great divinities watch over and guard marriage and the procreation of children, unless these things are the proper concern of man? Why should one say that they are the proper concern of man, but not the concern of the philosopher? Can it be because the philosopher is worse than other men? Certainly he ought not to be worse, but better and more just and more truly good. Or could one say that the man who does not take an interest in his city is not worse and more unjust than the man who does? The man who looks out only for his own interests is not worse than the one who looks out for the common good. Or can it be that the man who chooses the single life is more patriotic, more a friend and partner of his fellow man, than the man who maintains a home and rears children and contributes to the growth of his city, which is exactly what a married man does? It's clear, therefore, that it's fitting for a philosopher to concern himself with marriage and having children. And if this is fitting, how, my young friend, could that argument of yours that marriage is a handicap for a philosopher ever be sound? For manifestly, the study of philosophy is nothing else than to search out by reason what is right and proper, and by deeds to put it into practice. Such then were the words he spoke at that time. Lecture 15. Should every child that is born be raised? Is it not true that the lawgivers, whose special function it was by careful search to discern what is good for the state and what is bad, what promotes and what is detrimental to the common good, all considered the increase of the homes and of the citizens the most fortunate thing, for the cities and the decrease of them the most shameful thing? And when the citizens had few or no children, did they not regard it as a loss? But when they had children, yes, plenty of them, did they not regard it as a gain? So it was for this reason that they forbade women to suffer abortions and imposed a penalty upon those who disobeyed. For this reason they discouraged them from choosing childlessness and avoiding parenthood, and for this reason they gave to both husband and wife a reward for large families, and set a penalty upon childlessness. How then can we avoid doing wrong and breaking the law if we do the opposite of the wish of the lawgivers? Godlike men and dear to the gods, whom it is considered good and advantageous to follow. And certainly we do the opposite if we avoid having many children. How can we help committing a sin against the gods of our fathers and against Zeus, guardian of the race, if we do this? For just as the man who is unjust to strangers sins against Zeus, god of hospitality, and one who is unjust to friends sins against Zeus, god of friendship, so whoever is unjust to his own family sins against the gods of his fathers and against Zeus, guardian of the family, from whom wrongs done to the family are not hidden, and surely one who sins against the gods is impious. And that raising many children is an honourable and profitable thing, one may gather from the fact that a man who has many children is honoured in the city, that he has the respect of his neighbours, that he has more influence than his equals, if they are not equally blessed with children. I need not argue that a man with many friends is more powerful than the one who has no friends. And so a man who has many children is more powerful than one without any, or with only a few children, or rather much more so, since a son is closer than a friend. One may remark what a fine sight it is to see a man or woman surrounded by their children. Surely one could not witness a procession arrayed in honour of the gods so beautiful, nor a choral dance performed in order at a religious celebration so well worth seeing as a chorus of children forming a guard of honour for their father or mother in the city of their birth, leading their parents by the hand or dutifully caring for them in some other way. What is more beautiful than this sight? What is more enviable than these parents, especially if they are good people? For whom would one more gladly join in praying for blessings from the gods, or whom would one be more willing to assist in need? Very true, you say, but I am a poor man and quite without means, and if I have many children, from what source should I find food for them all? But pray, whence do the little birds, who are much poorer than you, feed their young, the swallows and nightingales and larks and blackbirds? Homer speaks of them in these words. Even as a bird carries to her unfledged young whatever morsels she happens to come upon, though she fares badly herself. Do these creatures surpass man in intelligence? You certainly would not say that. In strength and endurance, then? No. Still less in that respect. Well then, do they put away food and store it up? Not at all, and yet they rear their young and find sustenance for all that are born to them. The plea of poverty, therefore, is unjustified. But what seems to me most monstrous of all, some who do not even have poverty as an excuse, and in spite of prosperity and even riches, are so inhuman as not to rear later born offspring in order that those earlier born may inherit greater wealth, by such a deed of wickedness planning prosperity for their surviving children, that these may have a greater share of their father's goods. Their parents rob them of brothers, never having learned how much better it is to have many brothers than to have many possessions. For possessions inspire intrigue on the part of the neighbours, but brothers discourage intriguers. And possessions need support, but brothers are the strongest supporters. One cannot compare a good friend to a brother, nor the help which others, friends and equals give to that which a brother gives. What good would one compare to the goodwill of a brother as a pledge of security? What better disposed sharer of common goods could one find than a good brother, whose presence in misfortune would one desire more than such a brother's? For my part, I consider the man most enviable who lives amid a number of like-minded brothers, and I consider most beloved of the gods the man who has these blessings at home. Therefore I believe that each one of us ought to try to leave brothers rather than money to our children, so as to leave greater assurances of blessings.